We hardly ever mention the J word, by which I mean Jesus.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Check out this conversation between Bishop Barron and this rabbi. So the host, Dave Rubin, specifically asked Bishop Barron and this rabbi to explain the fundamental difference that each sees between Christianity and Judaism. Now, Bishop Barron says that the difference between Christianity and Judaism is Jesus. Jews get Jesus wrong. And let's just say the rabbi doesn't really like it. Let's see if you can tell by how he responds just what he really thinks about Jesus. And then we'll reflect on the back end.
So we're talking about Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah.
But those are not exactly the same thing. So what, maybe each of you could pick perhaps one thing. Now, I guess Judaism came first, not I guess, but Judaism did
I'll give you a big one.
Our older brothers in the faith.
Yeah.
Christianity differ, which is in vicarious atonement. In the Jewish tradition, if you don't make reparations to the person whom you've hurt, God can't forgive you. That's a big difference. I mean, and this was illustrated most famously, not exclusively, but most famously, when one of the prosecutors at Nuremberg asked the priest, does that mean that if, say, Eichmann repented on his deathbed and accepted Jesus, he would be forgiven and saved, but Anne Frank would go to hell? And the priest said, that's the mystery of grace. That's a difference.
If I were to name a difference, it's Christ is the difference. So I wouldn't want to reduce things to ethics. We find all kinds of common ground when it comes to ethics, but I'd resist the Kantian move to reduce religion to ethics. I mean, that's a dimension of it. It's a consequence of it. The difference is Jesus, you know, and Jesus means the coming together of divinity and humanity in such a way that humanity is transfigured and brought up into a share in the divine life. And that's the mystical heart of Christianity. From that flows all kinds of ethical, you know, implications. But that's the central mystery, I think, is divinization. The Greek fathers call it theosis. The Latins call it deificatio, that God became one of us, that we might become a sharer in his own life.
And the Jews call it false.
No,
That
good.
is true. No, that's why to call someone a Jew for Jesus is an oxymoron, because that was actually the critical dividing line between Jews and Christians, was the acceptance of Jesus as divine or the Son of God or the Messiah.
So what do you see, sort of wrong isn't the right term, but what do you see as conflicting with your values? Or conflicting with Jewish values?
So first of all, a human being doesn't become God in the Jewish tradition. God is transcendent and immanent, but always intangible. And that does not take human form, never took human form. Also, even though Christianity talks about 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, I remember when I was in high school and we had a Baptist preacher come to our high school and told us, you know, you seem like nice boys and girls, but you're all going to hell. And I asked him, I said, well, if something is perfect, it doesn't need anything added to it. So is the Father perfect? And he said, yes. And I said,
we hardly ever mention the J word, by which I mean Jesus.
Right.
So we tend to say it's great that we're nice to each other and we've overcome these old, you know, animosities, and we stand for the great ethical principles, which is great and true, and I'd never, ever want to go back behind it. But I would say, well, now what about Jesus? Let's talk about Jesus. And then people get very squirrely. Now, I certainly understand, given our rather regrettable history on this thing, you know, that we're always worried about religious violence. I get it. At the same time, I think it's a desideratum that we'd find a way to have a respectful and nonviolent argument.
All right, we're going to stop it there because they kind of go down another rabbit trail. What I found so fascinating is how this rabbi just flat out calls Jesus false. And, you know, I didn't really think that was very appropriate. It's one thing if you're talking to other, you know, your Jewish friends or your other Jewish rabbis, and you want to talk about how Jesus is false. It's another thing when you're having a conversation with a Catholic bishop who's explaining Jesus, who he thinks is the God-man, who he thinks is the God of the universe enfleshed, and is the one that has saved him from his sins. And you have no regard, you have no humility, you have no even really anything positive to say. You just flat out call him false. I thought it was shocking, to be honest. And then he goes on to talk about Jews for Jesus as an oxymoron, which I didn't see how that necessarily connected. The more I thought about it, I think what he's referring to is the fact that Jews are monotheistic and Jesus would mean something like a Trinitarian understanding of God. So it's an oxymoron because to be Jewish is to be monotheistic. I think that's kind of what he's getting at. Anyways, it didn't seem obvious to me why he went from what Bishop Barron said to saying that. You know what I mean? This is the second video I've done with rabbis and bishop barons, specifically looking at how rabbis react to Jesus once Bishop Barron mentions Jesus. So in this clip, the rabbi, Rabbi Wolp, just flat out calls him false. And in the other video I did, the other rabbi wouldn't even talk about Jesus. He just evaded the question altogether. I think it is safe to say that things do get a little squirrely, to use Bishop Barron's term, when you mention the God man. It reminds me of Jesus' words, though, in Matthew 5. He reminds those that stick up for him or talk about him or proclaim him or believe in his name that they are going to be persecuted. They are going to be reviled. And of course, we see in Jesus' day, the Jewish leaders, the religious leaders of that day, got Jesus killed and they mocked Jesus as well. And the same is true even in the 21st century. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Fascinating clip. See you in the next one. God bless and peace.